Oh yes guys, Tech here, and today we'll be speaking about the Bitcoin halving. Most importantly, we'll be speaking about the Bitcoin price and how each and every halving starts a new bull market. So if you're new to Bitcoin, if you're new to this concept of halving, this video will change your life because you will understand how to see the future of Bitcoin before everyone else, how to see the coming bull market before everyone else. And if you already know about the halving, if you already know what it is, then you will brush up your knowledge and you will get more confidence in what Bitcoin is and most importantly, what Bitcoin will do in the coming years. And as I said, the Bitcoin halving normally is preceding all bull markets. So if we ever want Bitcoin to go to 100K, 200K and beyond, it's likely to happen only after the halving. And the halving will happen next year in March or April. It depends on how fast the miners mine. But the big question is, of course, why does the halving have such a big impact on price? And why is it still not priced in? Because we all know that the halving is gonna happen. So why is it so that it's still not priced in? Those who already know about it will brush up the knowledge, and if you're new to Bitcoin, this will change your life. So on that note, let's get started. Let's first and foremost speak about mining Bitcoin, because that is how new Bitcoin is produced. As you know, there will ever be only 21 million Bitcoin. And right now we have approximately 19 million in circulation. And new Bitcoin is created whenever a miner mines a block and produces a block that is put into the blockchain. And when a block is produced, a bunch of transactions are getting confirmed. So that's the technical term for it. And each and every 4 years, this reward that miners are getting is being cut in half. And there are many reasons for this, but the biggest reason is that you want to cut inflation. You want to make Bitcoin more valuable. You want to ensure that Bitcoin is a more desired and more valued asset due to the fact that inflation is being cut every 4 years, and eventually inflation will go to zero because, again, only 21 million Bitcoin will ever be produced. So miners are mining Bitcoin. They're using these special computers designed to mine Bitcoin. The miners are rewarded with Bitcoin itself, and the technical term for this reward is called the block reward subsidy, because we want miners to have an incentive to mine. And so that's why we give them new Bitcoin that is being produced, and this new inflation is being halved every 4 years. And of course, the miners need the reward because they need to pay for electricity, they need to pay for their equipment, and that is their whole incentive, that they mine Bitcoin and they get the Bitcoin block reward or the block subsidy. Now, there is another way that the miners get paid, and that is from the transaction fees. So the whole idea is that with time, miners should earn less from block subsidy, this inflation, and more from the transaction fees. And this is the brilliant design of Satoshi Nakamoto, because when Bitcoin was new, no one was doing any transactions. So most of the reward that miners received was from the inflation. And now, as more and more people are using Bitcoin, as we have more and more transactions, this instead becomes a bigger part of the miner revenue, and we can decrease the inflation to zero. So each and every 4 years, inflation is decreased, and as Bitcoin gets more adopted, the fees replace the subsidy, they replace the inflation as being the reason why miners are mining. So as a result of this halving of the inflation, the number of new Bitcoin entering the circulation shrinks. And in theory, demand should stay the same or even increase as Bitcoin grows in adoption, as more and more people learn about Bitcoin. And so even if we keep constant demand, the Bitcoin price naturally will go up each and every 4 years due to the halving event. So now you know what the halving is, and now you know also why it's called the halving, because we halve the inflation rate each and every 4 years. So today, approximately 900 Bitcoin a day is entering the market, and after the next halving, we'll only have 450 new Bitcoin a day entering the market from inflation. So far, after each halving, the price of Bitcoin has taken a leg up. Let's look at the price history. The first halving was on November 28th, 2012, when it went from releasing 50 Bitcoin per block to releasing only 25 Bitcoin per block. Bitcoin price increased 81 times in the bull run that followed, and Bitcoin went from $12 all the way to $1,000. The second halving happened in July 2016 and reduced the block reward subsidy from 25 to 12.5 Bitcoin per block. In the bull run that followed, the price surged a massive 31x. From $650 to almost $20,000. And the last halving was on May 11th, 2020. and it gave the miners a block reward of 6.25 Bitcoin. So yet again, we halved the block reward, we halved the inflation. And the price of Bitcoin went from approximately 8,800 at the time of the halving to almost $69,000 at its peak, almost an 8x. And so the next halving is gonna happen in 2024 and will take us to 3.125 Bitcoin per block. And we shall see if the history repeats and if we see another leg up. It's worth noting that global liquidity has always been on the rise during Bitcoin previous halvings. And right now the Fed is sucking liquidity out of the system. You do know about the milkshake theory, where the Fed has basically inflated the world liquidity from Corona, from the great financial crisis, and now that inflation is going wild, they're sucking it, just like you drink a milkshake and you suck it with a straw. So if that trend continues, this time really could be different, folks. But with the Bitcoin spot ETF looming in the shadows and the prospect of money printing coming back in 2024 due to the presidential election, no one really knows what will happen to the Bitcoin price. But of course, we can speculate. We can predict and we can place our bets. It's worth noting that right now, at 6.25 Bitcoin per block, Bitcoin's rate of inflation is approximately 2%. And after the 2024 halving, the reward will drop to 3.125 Bitcoin per block, and the annual inflation will then be at 1%. So Bitcoin inflation will be 1% per year, and of course you have to compare that to the alternatives. You have to compare it to the fiat system. You have to compare it to the US dollar and other fiat currencies. If you look back at the COVID times and you see how many dollars were printed in just 1 to 2 years, you realize it was approximately 20% of all dollars in existence in just a few short years. Then you compare it to Bitcoin, where you know for sure the inflation. It is written in the source code and no one can change that. That is of course the beauty of Bitcoin. That's why personally I'm a big believer in Bitcoin, and I'm a big believer in the fact that we haven't even seen the potential of Bitcoin. People haven't really understood how powerful it is to have money that is worldwide, fully neutral, apolitical, with a known emission schedule. So now, before we get into the price predictions for this halving cycle, let's quickly talk about what some people are saying about the role of mining firms. And as you know, mining firms are the recipients of the inflation. When they mine Bitcoin, they receive this block subsidy, and so whatever they do with this new minted Bitcoin really affects the market a lot. And that's why whenever the halving happens, we need to see how it affects the miners and how much sell pressure we remove from the market due to the halving. So the consensus is only the miners with the lowest energy cost and most efficient equipment will survive this time around. Michael Dubrowski, a co-founder of POWX, a crypto mining and research nonprofit, pointed out, and I quote, "The theory is that there will be less available Bitcoin to buy if miners have less to sell. So individual miners and small mining outfits may have to drop out of the mining ecosystem or risk being taken over by large players." According to JP Morgan, only the most efficient miners will survive. And in a recent report, the banking giant said, and I quote, "Bitcoin retail demand will remain strong ahead of the halving. And, I quote, "the event will double the Bitcoin production cost to around $40,000, creating a positive psychological effect." The mining industry has turned its focus to efficiency as opposed to simply bringing as much hash rate online as possible. Because of the price volatility pre-halving and the crazy gains made post-halving, debates and speculation have always surrounded the event. Let's go back in time and talk about some past price predictions and how they've turned out. First and foremost, let's start with Anthony Pompliano, founder of Morgan Creek Digital, who predicted a 100,000 Bitcoin for 2019 in 2017. He was obviously very wrong. His reasoning was sound though, as if you look at the supply and demand economics and then you assume that demand stays constant and you decrease the new emission of a particular asset such as Bitcoin, then of course the price should head north, which it did, but it did not really reach 100K. Another prediction gone wrong was billionaire investor Tim Draper's 250,000 Bitcoin by the end of 2020. And this is a quote from 2019. $250,000 for one Bitcoin means that Bitcoin would have about a 5% market share of the currency market. And I think that may be understating the potential of Bitcoin. So now that we've discussed some of the predictions that were laid out on the table in the last halving, and we can see how some of them were too optimistic, although they were still correct. In my mind, both Pomp and Tim Draper, they were still correct, that we would see a massive move to the upside. And we went from 8K to approximately 70K. Yes, we did not go to 100 or 250K, but yet we went from 8K to 70K. So let's speak about the future. Let's talk about the different predictions that people are saying about the coming halving cycle and what kind of price we can predict. Let's start with Jesse Myers, co-founder of On-Ramp Capital, who thinks Bitcoin will only hit 100K after the halving, saying the market will adjust to the halving's effects 12 to 18 months after the event. And so while Myers leans towards this patient outlook, figures like Ron Paul and Michael Saylor hint at the more substantial post-halving gains for the price of Bitcoin. Michael Saylor in particular predicts 500K, Ron Paul predicts 250K, Dan Tapiero predicts 150K, and Pantera Capital predicts 148K, just to name a few. Then we have Geoff Kendrick at Standard Charter saying that Bitcoin could reach 50K by the end of 2023 and potentially soar to over 120K by the end of 2024. Our next prediction comes from Adam Back, one of the early Bitcoin adopters, a Bitcoin developer, and a cyberpunk. So he has bet 0.01 Bitcoin with Vikingo on X.com, saying that Bitcoin will reach 100K between now and the halving, which he puts on March 31st. So let us know in the comment section what you think. Do you think that Bitcoin could go above 100K before the halving, and what's your prediction for the Bitcoin price after the halving? We have another prediction, and that's from Fundstrat, a research firm founded by former JP Morgan chief equity strategist Tom Lee. They say that Bitcoin could climb potentially to 180K by the 2024 halving, hinging largely on the launch of a Bitcoin spot ETF. Fundstrat sees a high probability of a Bitcoin ETF approval very soon, which they say will boost the daily demand for Bitcoin by $100 million. And they don't see the likes of giants like BlackRock being denied an ETF much longer. What about Mike Novogratz, the CEO of Galaxy Digital? It was hard to find a 2024 prediction for Mike. He's seemingly not as positive as he's used to be. At one time, he claimed Bitcoin had the potential to hit $500,000 by 2024.
But I think with all the institutional adoption, we could be at $100,000 at the end of the year and $500,000 by 2024. That's when Bitcoin would eclipse gold.
So much so that he even considered commemorating it with a tattoo, which has not gone that well for him in the past. Novogratz now suggests that he would be content with Bitcoin reaching 30,000 by the end of 2023.
Until further notice, at least 12 months, these are going to be really complicated markets to trade and complicated markets to make money in. And in some ways, just preserving your wealth is a huge win.
Speaking at the Bank of America conference, he reflected on Bitcoin's price action, saying that such a figure would exceed his recent expectations. Interesting. As you may know, Mike Novogratz has been a very vocal bull both in the last bear market and in the last bull market. However, his bold Luna predictions probably have humbled him, because Luna went to zero and he's lost some credibility because he tattooed Luna on himself and because he was affiliated with Luna. So that's the reason probably why he's way more calm and is not stating all of these massive predictions like he did in the past. As we stand right now, at the end of September 2023, the Bitcoin price has been ranging between 25 and 30,000 US dollars since March. More than half a year. The next halving will occur between March and early May of 2024, and as you already know, the block subsidy will drop in half to 3.125 Bitcoin per block. The miners will start getting half of the amount of Bitcoin for their efforts, and we will see if history repeats and the price of Bitcoin takes another leg up. So in summary, what does the Bitcoin halving achieve? Number one, it helps to maintain Bitcoin's value proposition as a deflationary asset. Number two, it increases competition and rids the network of less productive miners. Number three, it helps to maintain the network security and decentralization. Number four, it facilitates probable price appreciation and positive market sentiment. And of course, nothing is set in stone. We're just speculating and placing our bets accordingly. However, Factors such as the macro conditions and the intriguing correlation between the global M2 money supply and Bitcoin, both of which have a 4-year cycle that coincide with each other, will make this halving event once again, folks, something to see, as we have not experienced a halving event in a contracting economy, in a contracting liquidity environment before. Looking into the future, this is not the last halving. We'll have approximately 29 more halvings before inflation goes to zero and Bitcoin reaches its final supply of 21 million, which will happen approximately in the year 2140. And I want to end this discussion with answering a very important question, namely, why is the Bitcoin halving still not priced in? If the Bitcoin halving produces a bull market each and every cycle, why aren't investors already today buying Bitcoin, pumping the price up if they want to be part of the Bitcoin appreciation post-halving? It's a very good question because everyone knows about the halving. It is written in the source code. Yet, most people in the world don't even understand Bitcoin. Yet, most people in the world still think Bitcoin is a scam. Most people in the world don't know what Bitcoin is. They've never used it. And that's why it's impossible to price in the halving for real, because we still have very limited adoption, because we're so early in this industry, the market is simply not efficient. The efficient market hypothesis doesn't apply in this exact scenario. Why? Because most people have no clue what crypto is, they have never had Bitcoin, and they will very, very soon. That's why the halving is likely not priced in. That's why a lot of gains are likely to come our way if we stay in this industry, if we keep learning about this industry. If you guys keep watching these videos, we will do more of them. So smash up the like, subscribe, and see you all very, very soon.